One of the conservation measures that is being proposed is captive breeding. So when a population gets down to a critically low level and is highly likely to disappear, you could make a good argument for taking them out of the habitat and putting them in captivity, letting them breed in captivity until you've got a bunch of them, and then put them back to where they were before and to their natural habitat. For amphibians, there's one big advantage, and that is that a lot of the species have lots of eggs. And so when they're young, when they're tadpoles, they have a very high mortality rate. That's when fish are feeding on them, birds are feeding on them, other frogs are feeding on them. So the frogs have a much higher, and all amphibians really, have a much higher reproductive rate than they need to in captivity, because in the wild their early years are so dangerous. So that's an advantage. You can breed up quickly, so you can have a lot of them.
We know that it works, captive breeding programs work. In the 1970s, a species, the midwife toad from Mallorca, was rediscovered. It was believed to have been extinct in very small pockets, only a few little populations that were under threat. So with a breeding program by the Jersey Zoo and the government of Mallorca, they had a successful breeding program. Now the species are back in about 16 population centres, with at least 6 of those being established through captive breeding. So it's a very successful example of how species can be brought back.
Losing 2,000 to 3,000 species of amphibians would be very noticeable and drastically degrade the health of both aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. The loss of a single species is akin to losing 2 species because of habitat and functional differences between larvae and adults in most amphibians. The challenge is so great that we require a major shift in our thinking. We need to wake up, unite, and make the jump necessary to rescue Earth's endangered species. Our future depends on it.
In the Caribbean, there's a lot of island states that have figures of 70 to 90% of their amphibian species threatened with extinction. In Sri Lanka, they've already lost 21 species in the last century, and they're facing of their 109 species, about half of those are threatened with extinction in the next few decades.
I think that there may be some of them that are disappearing for reasons that we don't know. And they may even be natural reasons. We've always lost some species. But I think that any time we can identify a human factor in leading to the endangerment or the threat or even the extinction of a species, we should address that human factor. And because we're people, we know how to address human problems. Not always successfully, but we know how to take a good shot at it. And we should.
The extent to which we can do something about the problem relates to how much we're willing to invest in it, in the solutions. By raising awareness of the problem, then that should bring in greater investment. And by having a greater investment in the solution, there'll be more awareness about it, and so on.
Yeah, I think that if you look at the election of Obama as the president of the U.S., there's some interesting lessons that we might try to apply to frogs, to amphibians. You might say, what? Excuse me, this is politics. What does this have to do with frogs? Yeah, but look at what he did. He was able to mobilize a whole new sector of people who were not interested in politics. And we could, by analogy, say who weren't interested in frogs. But if you look at what attracted him, he had a good message. He was solid, he was honest. Frogs are honest. There they are, they exist as part of nature. They've been there for hundreds of millions of years. You know, frogs are an ancient life form on our planet. And certainly we have to value them far into the future. But you know, so what do? Well, you recall that Obama, when he was citing Martin Luther King, he would say, I have a dream. He didn't say, I have a nightmare. And so there's a real difference. You know, I think that young people are tired of being depressed. They're tired of the bad news. And so let's try to give them the happy part of frogs. Frogs are actually funny. You know, you look at the size of their mouth, it looks like they're smiling all the time. So I think that if we do go with frogs with a positive message, and have in mind that they're seriously threatened, and maybe at some point in the story that comes out clearly as well, that we need to do things to help ensure that this font of inspiration is still there, and that we've got this full diversity of frogs, which really is remarkable, so that our children's children will also have that diversity to enjoy and appreciate.
The amphibian extinction crisis that we have on our hands is a really serious one to take note of, because it's a sign that we're not just losing things fast, we're actually entering a period where we could be actually collapsing, that the fabric that keeps us together is tearing, and that if we don't act when 30% of our species of amphibians are threatened with extinction, when would we act?